Kia ora, doctoral candidates, ko Nigel Harris, toku ingoa, ko au te tumuaki o te kura-taura rangahau. So my name is Nigel Harris, I'm the Dean of the Graduate Research School, and I'll take you through a few processes and tips regarding your oral examination for your doctorate. So look, just in summary, all candidates at AUT undergo an oral examination. It's a wonderful process. It's a chance for you as the candidate to engage directly with your two examiners. There are not many occasions in your life that you'll spend an hour and a half or so talking with two people who have read your thesis from start to finish and are directly interested and engaged in your work. So it's a great moment. It's a culmination of a huge amount of work for you. It's right near the end of the process, depending on the outcome, of course. And in that way, on many occasions, it's a celebration for you as well. You will be nervous. I would expect you to be. You're earning a doctorate from AUT. Nerves show that you care. That's a good thing. So don't worry about that. If you feel anxious and nervous about it, use those nerves. It's a good sign. Okay, so fundamentally what it is a conversation between you and your two examiners, and that really is the core of the matter. Just to explain, the oral examination process at AUT, it's just yourself present, your two examiners. You will have your supervisory team, or at least one of them, present, and a convener who's appointed by the university. No other people are present in the examination room, so it's not a public defence. You don't give a visual presentation, it's not a PowerPoint. It's effectively you talking with the examiners. Normally takes about an hour and a half as a guideline, but it can be a bit shorter, it can be a bit longer, that's not a rule. And it is a discussion, and because of that, the conversation is to and fro. The examiners will ask a question, you'll answer and reflect and consider, and that will take natural twists and turns in the conversation. And that's really what it's all about. So let me talk you through that in a little more detail. A little bit of a flowchart here. Now, anyone interested in this presentation is probably reasonably near the oral examination process. So by now, your examiners would have been appointed by the university. Your supervisors recommend those examiners, and then they're approved by faculty and the University Postgraduate Board. There are two of them. They're external to AUT. Sometimes there's one from New Zealand and one international, but it can be a different mix depending on your topic. Now that's done before you submit your thesis. So then you submit your thesis, and then normally approximately 3 or 4 months after you submit your thesis, you will have your oral examination. Now that's a guideline, so I just want to stress that at this point. It does depend on a number of factors, and the key thing really is whether or not your examiners get their reports in on time. So examiners are asked to complete their reports in 8 weeks. There's a little bit of a process to get those reports out to them. They receive them. They're asked to get them back in 8 weeks. They don't always do that because we're dealing with human beings who have other deadlines. And remember, they're not AUT staff, so we're not always able to say to them, you must have the report in 8 weeks. Sometimes it drifts on a little bit. What I can assure you is that the Graduate Research School examinations team who oversee this process do actively pursue those examiners and try to get them in on time. After that, there has to be the scheduling of the examination. We're bringing together the diaries of yourself, your two examiners, your supervisory team, and the convener. We're often dealing with examiners who are in different time zones, and so that can mean there's sometimes a delay in the process. But look, if you allow 3 to 4 months. The other thing is that a lot of people, it's human nature, will try to get their thesis submitted just before the Christmas break. Try to get that done so you can have a holiday along with your academic support staff. And that can delay proceedings because the university closes down for a few weeks, and then after that there is a backlog. So if you submit your thesis right at the end of November or the start of December, it may not be exactly 3 or 4 months before your examination. Sometimes that can delay things. Nonetheless, we do try to get things done in a very timely manner for you. Okay, so the convener is appointed by the University Postgraduate Board or the Graduate Research School, and they are people who are experienced with supervision, been trained in the convening process. They're not experts in the discipline, so they're not examiners. They don't know your discipline. They are there to chair or facilitate the process to make sure that your examiners know the rules and regulations at AUT, and to make sure that the examination is conducted in a fair and robust manner. You will meet them exactly 1 week prior to your oral examination, so it's a chance for you to do some whakawhanaungatanga, some relationship or rapport building with them, and they'll explain to you the process again in detail because you won't recall everything from today's session. So it's a chance for you to ask questions, to seek clarity, and they'll sort of overview what's going to happen on the day. So the oral examination scheduling itself, that is conducted by the Graduate Research School examinations team. There'll be potentially doodle polls, emails, and please be as flexible as possible. You, as the candidate, are at the centre of this process, but we have to try to bring together the diaries of a multitude of different people, as I've mentioned, and that can be challenging. So we do the very best to find a time that suits everyone, and we then lock that in and send you out a calendar appointment. Now, examinations can be on Zoom. In fact, for the most part, you don't have examiners attend in person unless you are using Format 3. And for those of you that are using that format, you'll know that. You might have an exhibition or some sort of creative output where your examiners are attend in person. Other than that, if you're using Format 1 or 2, and you're dealing with examiners who are usually from outside of Auckland or, often international, more often than not, they will attend the examination via Zoom, the oral examination. They can attend in person if they want to, but we don't sort of fly them in specifically for that. Not the oral examination, that is. You can have your oral examination at the Graduate Research School, which is in the city in WU building. We have an excellent facility there for that. Audio-visual facilities. So great microphone, good camera, big screen. And you can convene along with your supervisors and the convener at the Graduate Research School to have that exam and perhaps have the examiners on the screen. In some cases, people prefer not to have to come to the Graduate Research School. Maybe you've gone back offshore for your examination, gone home, for example, and it is possible to do the entire thing via Zoom. But that's something for you to discuss directly with your supervisors and agree on, and you can let the Graduate Research School examiner team know what your preference is, whether or not you want to be at the GRS or attend via Zoom. Okay, so as I've mentioned, that briefing with the convener that's appointed is exactly 1 week prior to your oral examination, and that's the same for every candidate. We standardise that. No matter when your examiners get the reports in, we keep that standard so that it's fair for everyone. You can imagine that some examiners get the reports in very early, and for others it's last minute, or if not a little late, and rather than advantaging or disadvantaging you as a candidate and being unfair across the university, we keep that really standard, and it's 1 week exactly prior to the examination. Your supervisors, just so that you know, do receive your reports about a day prior to that meeting, just to give them a heads up on what's in the reports. But the idea is at that stage they don't share them with you, it's just so that they get some forewarning of what's in the reports before you have that meeting with your convener. And so you're probably sitting there wondering, well, when do I get the reports as the doctoral candidate? Well, that's very simple. You will have this meeting exactly 1 week prior to the examination, and then just at the end of that meeting, those reports will pop up in your inbox. Now, we don't send them to you before the meeting, and the reason before that is that, as you can probably imagine, your attention will be on what's in the reports rather than meeting the convener and discussing the process. So we leave that until the end of the meeting. So you get an electronic copy of those reports in your inbox, and your supervisors will have them too. At that stage, you will know who your examiners are. 2 examiners, the identity of your examiners will be revealed. Just to be clear, you may not contact them at all at that stage, but naturally you can look them up. Go ahead and look them up online, find out who they are and where they come from and what they do. No problems at all, just don't contact them. And just to be clear, the reports that you receive, although you receive them just after that meeting, they are anonymised, and so you don't know which examiner has provided which report. We do that for the integrity for the examiners, but at the oral examination itself, you'll probably get a pretty good feeling for who's written what. So just to summarise so far in the process, your examiners were appointed by the faculty after request by your supervisors before you submitted your thesis. You submit your thesis and there's a process for that. A few months later, you should have your oral examination, as long as your examiners get their reports in on time, which they don't always do, but we chase them. And it may be slightly delayed if you submit along with everyone else just before the Christmas break. That can delay things a little bit. The convener is appointed by the Graduate Research School or University Postgraduate Board, so they will look after you for the process, they'll oversee it, and you will have a meeting with them 1 week prior in which they'll explain the whole process to you again, answer any questions, you can get to meet them and just be comfortable with who they are and vice versa. And then just at the end of that meeting, which is exactly 1 week prior to your oral examination, you receive your reports. And so that starts an intensive week for you as the candidate, working with your supervisors. When you know that oral examination is scheduled, try to keep that week free. Put everything else aside, it'll be an intense week for you. Your nerves will build, you'll read and reread those reports, you'll go back over the thesis, which you may not have looked at for a wee while. You'll remind yourself, you'll review your self-on material, and expect to have a busy week preparing for the exam. Have a mock oral examination with your supervisors. I'm sure they'll do that for you. They can pretend to be examiners and throw a few questions at you and see how you respond. That's really good practice. Read, reread, speculate, that's normal. The nerves will build, all good, that's fine. So that's all scheduled and you've done that prep for the week, and the day of the examination arrives. Well, you might be in person at Graduate Research School, or you'll be waiting in a Zoom room, one of the two, with your supervisory team. We'll put you in a waiting room. That can be either a Zoom room or a waiting room up at the Graduate Research School. You can go and get yourself something to eat and drink, and there's a room there that you can sit in with your supervisory team and prepare yourself for the moment. At that point, the convener is meeting with the examiners just to go over rules and regulations with them and make sure they understand the process at AUT, and asking them how they'd like to run the oral examination. It normally takes about 10 or 15 minutes. So what then happens is you will be called into the room. So either the convener will pop out and get you in your waiting room at the Graduate Research School, or Zoom-wise, someone from the exams team will Zoom you into the room with the examiners and the convener. So start your oral examination. Now, people often ask me, how long does that take? Well, there is no rule, but typically it would take in the vicinity of 1.5 hours as a very broad guideline. They can be a bit quicker, that can be longer. So, but if you're thinking roughly that time frame, it's going to give you a ballpark figure for how long it might take. So what happens is, well, you will come into the room physically or via Zoom, and the first thing that will happen is the convener, of course, will introduce everyone as you'd expect. The very next thing that will happen is the convener will simply hand it over to you as the candidate. Now, what do you do? The first 5 minutes after the introductions is you delivering an oral-only presentation to your examiners. In other words, it's you talking at the examiners on the screen, probably, for about 5 minutes. Now, what do you say in that 5 minutes? Well, it's over to you. You can prepare for that with your supervisory team, but it's very open. It's a chance for you to open proceedings, perhaps relay things that you're proud of about the thesis or your doctorate work. Any updates? Maybe you've got publications that have been accepted since you first submitted your work while it was in examination, that type of thing. Don't try to answer all of the examiner's questions in 5 minutes. That's what the exam's for. But look, you can prepare for that. You'll need to practice it because it is just you talking. There is no PowerPoint. There's nothing visual. You don't share the screen. It's just you talking at the examiners. And that's for about 5 minutes. What then happens, and we're still in here, oral examination process. You have notes about all of this, by the way, in the PowerPoint, but I thought I'd just stick with this instead of bombing you with an entire PowerPoint. So you've come into the room, you've delivered your 5 minutes. The convener will simply say something like, "Thank you, candidate, and now I'm going to hand it over to your examiners." Now what then happens next? Well, first of all, your supervisors won't contribute to the process. They're not there to contribute to the conversation, they're just there in support of you, so they're not involved in the conversation. It is just you and the two examiners. The convener won't say an awful lot once proceedings start, really. They'll just get things going, and after that they'll probably pretty much hand it over to the examiners and really just step in where it's needed. So the examiners will decide how they want to do the questions, and there's a couple of different ways that are quite common, but you don't know really until they have met each other for the first time, often just before your oral examination starts. And what will happen is sometimes one examiner will go first and they'll ask all their questions and discuss with you. Ask a question, get the response, continue that conversation, and that might take 30 or 45 minutes as an example or a guideline. When they're done, they might hand it over to the other examiner and then they start that process, and so you do another 30 or 45 minutes. So that's one way that things can happen. The other way, and this is probably more common, is that the examiners will sort of interplay off each other. In other words, one of them will ask a question, they'll decide who goes first. It doesn't really make any difference to you who goes first or not. And they'll just agree on that in the meeting beforehand with the convener. And they'll just go, well, how about you go first, Nigel? And Nigel will go, sure, how about I ask the following things? They would have seen each other's reports at that stage. And so that examiner will ask you a question, have a discussion with you on a particular component of your work. It might be one chapter or one aspect. Let's say, for argument's sake, that lasts 5 to 10 minutes at a guess. It's just a guideline. They'll then say, well, how about examiner 2? Well, they'll call them by their name. How about you ask your questions now? And they'll just naturally hand off to each other, and that's quite common. They'll relay between each other over the course of the examination. So that goes on, and obviously that will draw to a sort of a natural conclusion. And again, it can take longer than an hour and a half, so that's not a rule, just to be clear on that. Once it's pretty clear that they don't have any more questions, the convener will check with them and say, thank you, examiners, and just checking there's no more questions at this stage, and the examiners will say something like, no thanks, I'm all good, I've no more questions at this stage, thanks. You and your supervisors will be asked to leave the room. And so if you're up at the Graduate Research School, up you get and back out to the waiting area. The convener stays in the room, or they'll take you out to the waiting area and go back to the room. If you're all on Zoom, you'll be zoomed back out to the Zoom waiting room. Now what happens then? Well, it'll take somewhere between, as a very general guideline, and please take this as a guideline, not a rule, approximately 20 to 60 minutes. Approximately. Sometimes a little shorter, but in the vicinity of 20 to 40 minutes, maybe sometimes longer. And it's the job of your convener to facilitate, to oversee, to convene the discussion with the examiners to come up with your final outcome. Now, just to be clear with you, they have provided the university with a provisional outcome in their reports. So we'll have a look at what those outcomes are shortly. But you don't know that in the oral examination, and neither do your supervisors. Only the Graduate Research School do. It's not disclosed to you. That is a provisional outcome because they can change depending on what happens in the oral examination. Nonetheless, your convener will discuss the final result, and there's a series of criteria for them to go through, and agree on the final outcome. Now, the final outcome options are both in the handbook and in these PowerPoint notes, which you will have in front of you, so you can go ahead and read through those. There are 5 possible options. The first 3 are all passes. The option 4 and 5 are not passes. So very briefly, option 1 is an outright pass. There's nothing further to do. That's pretty uncommon. Option 2 is a pass with minor amendments. That's up to normally a maximum of 1 month of work, so there's not a lot to do. Some minor editorial things, a few bits and pieces. And that goes back to your supervisors to be signed off, so the examiners don't see it again. Option 3, again, is still a pass, but there are more amendments to do than just minor. So it can take up to, and I stress up to, but not necessarily, 6 months of work. On occasions, the examiners will want to see the work again. They don't regrade your thesis, they don't re-examine it, but what they want to do is check that what they've asked to be amended has actually occurred. Or they might say, I want these things done, there are significant amendments, it'll take up to several months, but I will let the supervisory team oversee that process and sign it off. So those 2 options exist. Option 4 is what's called a revise and resubmit. That means there's quite a lot of work extra to do, and it's up to a year of full-time continued work. And option 5, which is very uncommon, is an outright fail. So those are the 5 options, and again, I have no idea what's going to happen in your exam, but I wanted to relay those to you. Okay, so you've left the room and that deliberation has occurred. You will be called back into the room. The convener will come out and get you if you're at Graduate Research School, or the GRS exams team will zoom you back into the room. At that very moment, you will receive your final outcome verbally from your convener. They will say to you, Nigel, probably congratulations, but we don't know the outcome of your exam. They'll say whatever the outcome is, it's a pass or not a pass. It's an option 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5, whatever the case may be. And they will briefly summarise the key amendments that the examiners are asked for. Not in a great deal of detail, but just the key things. And that technically is the end of the oral examination process. It becomes quite informal after that. There'll be a round of hopefully congratulations, but again, I don't know what your result's going to be. Your supervisors will often pitch in and probably thank the examiners, and I guess you'll want to thank the examiners. You can really say whatever you want. It's very open, it's informal, and that's the end of the matter. So that is the conclusion of the oral examination. Now, it's very common that you will have some amendments to do, and so after the examination, there's often more work for you to do, and that can be a challenge for you because you've kind of submitted, you've waited a few months, you've built up all the nerves to this oral examination, you have this exam, and then boom, you find out there's still a few things to do. Don't worry about that, it's very common, and it depends on the extent of them, of course, as to how long it's going to take. Nonetheless, over that period after the oral examination, work with your supervisory team, go through those amendments. Again, it's either your supervisors that will sign that off, or the examiners might want to see it again or need to see it again. Depends on your outcome. And once it's signed off by either of those 2, the very last moment in the process for you, in order to be eligible to graduate, is you load your thesis on Tūwhera. That's our open access repository in our library, Te Mata Puna. Tūwhera. So you have to do that in order to be eligible to graduate. I'm often asked about graduations. You'll probably be aware we normally have, 2, sometimes 3 graduation ceremonies per year. You don't have to wait for the ceremony to technically graduate. On every month or 2, there's a graduation cycle that occurs administratively. So, for example, if I'm graduating today, there is no examination and there's no graduation ceremony for quite a few months. But I know that the next month, as long as I get my amendments into Tūwhera, and it's signed off, or it's signed off first and then into tūwhera, I'm eligible to graduate and I can call myself a doctor after that point. You don't have to wait to actually go to the ceremony. But of course you may well choose to go to the ceremony. It's a wonderful moment. And I'd strongly encourage you to visualise that if you're at all able to get there. It's a great celebration. So that's the graduation. So look, I'm going to summarise that again for you. Your examiners are appointed, you submit your thesis. A few months later, you have your examination. The convener oversees that process. You meet with them 1 week beforehand, and that's when you get the reports, and so do your supervisors just before that. On the day of the examination, you'll be in a waiting room, either Zoom or in person. You'll be called into the room. The oral examination commences. 5 minutes from you talking, oral presentation only. Over to your examiners. They'll hold the question and answer with you. It might take an hour to an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. When that discussion's finished, you and your supervisory team are back out of the room or the Zoom room. The convener discusses the final result with your examiners. That might take 20, 30, 40 minutes, maybe longer. And you are then invited back into the room and you receive your final result. Then you do your amendments, get signed off. Tūwhera, last moment, you're done. You are eligible to graduate. So candidates, you will see the notes that you have in the PDF of this entire PowerPoint presentation, and it really expands all of this so that you can read it in due course. Please do remember though, you do get to meet with that convener and ask them questions again, and I'm sure your supervisors will know of this process so you can also work with them in preparation. I hope that helps, and I very much look forwards to whoever you are listening to this presentation, seeing you cross the stage with the floppy hat on and receiving the doctoral qualification from AUT, which is indeed a moment to be very proud of. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. Thank you very much.